In June 1314, Scotland was on the brink. 6,000 Scots faced an English army 3 times larger, packed with heavily armoured knights and deadly archers. By all logic, this battle should have been a massacre. The English do not expect resistance. They expect surrender. Their king believes this campaign will end Scottish rebellion forever. The numbers are overwhelming, the equipment superior, the outcome, in their minds, already decided. Across the field, the Scots wait in silence. Farmers, clansmen, warriors hardened by years of survival warfare. They are outnumbered, poorly equipped, but they are standing exactly where their king wants them. What happens here will decide whether Scotland survives as a kingdom or vanishes into history. And the man responsible for that decision is a king England once laughed at. At the start of the 14th century, Scotland was no longer free. English power dominated the land through force, executions, and occupation. Noble families were broken, castles seized, resistance crushed. English rule was enforced not through cooperation, but fear. Any challenge was met with punishment designed to discourage future rebellion. Scotland existed, but only as a conquered territory. Previous resistance had failed. Armed revolts collapsed under superior English resources. Leaders were captured and executed publicly. The message was unmistakable. Defiance meant death. Too many. Survival now depended on submission. The idea that Scotland could defeat England in open battle was not just unlikely. It was considered impossible. Yet one man refused to accept that future. Robert the Bruce, a noble with a claim to the throne, understood that England's strength was also its weakness. Large armies required space, supply, and predictable movement. Bruce would deny them all. He avoided open battles, destroyed castles instead of holding them, turned Scotland itself into a weapon. By 1314, Bruce controlled most of Scotland. Only one fortress remained in English hands: Stirling Castle. Its fall would sever England's access to the north. Its survival would restore English dominance. The situation forced a confrontation neither side could avoid. The battlefield was set, and Bruce would choose it carefully. By June 1314, England assembled one of the most powerful armies it had fielded in years. Thousands of experienced soldiers marched north under royal banners. These were not levies pulled from farms. They were hardened professionals, men who had campaigned across Britain and Wales, knights who had trained since childhood to fight from horseback, encased in mail, supported by disciplined infantry and archers. Their confidence came from experience. They had crushed resistance before, and they expected to do it again. On paper, the imbalance was extreme. England outnumbered the Scots more than 3 to 1. Their cavalry alone equaled nearly half the entire Scottish force. But numbers require space to function. Horses need room to charge. Archers need distance to fire. Infantry needs clear lines to advance. Bruce understood that strength only matters when it can be used, and he intended to deny the English every advantage their size should have given them. The battlefield Bruce selected was not dramatic. It was cramped, wet, and hostile to movement. The Bannockburn cut through the land, surrounded by marsh and soft ground. Dense woodland blocked the flanks. This was not a place where cavalry could maneuver or recover once momentum was lost. Bruce was not looking for glory. He was looking for control. And here, the ground itself would fight for Scotland. Bruce ordered thousands of small pits dug into the firm ground. Each was just deep enough to break a horse's leg. They were covered carefully with branches and grass. Invisible, silent, deadly. Against infantry, these traps meant confusion. Against cavalry, they meant catastrophe. A fallen knight in full armor was not a wounded soldier. He was a liability, unable to rise, vulnerable, and doomed if momentum carried others into him. Bruce trained his men in schiltrons, dense formations of spearmen, standing shoulder to shoulder. Each man's strength depended on the discipline of the others. Alone, a spearman was vulnerable. Together, they formed a living barrier of wood and iron. Against cavalry, these formations were devastating. Horses would not willingly charge into a wall of spear points, and those forced to do so paid the price. From the English perspective, the Scots still looked weak. Poorer armor, fewer horses, smaller numbers. What they failed to see was endurance. These men had fought for years without security, without supply lines, without mercy. Their strength was not in appearance, but in cohesion. England marched forward, convinced it would decide the battle. In reality, the ground and the formations already had. By the morning of June 23rd, the English army reached Bannockburn. Thousands of soldiers crowded into terrain never meant to hold them. Knights sat tall in their saddles, confident in their armor and training. Infantry packed in behind them, physically strong but already constrained. The sheer weight of the army became a weakness. Strength without space is pressure without release. Bruce watched as England compressed itself into a battlefield that offered no forgiveness. Robert the Bruce rode forward, not to attack, but to observe. He carried himself like a man accustomed to danger, strong, calm, and fully aware that leadership is measured under pressure. He needed to know whether the English would hesitate or rush, whether discipline or impatience would guide them. The battlefield was quiet, but tension hung heavy. Both sides understood that once the first blow landed, nothing could stop what followed. Among the English knights was Henry de Bohun, young, confident, and physically formidable. When he saw Bruce riding ahead with minimal protection, he believed he saw weakness. This was the mindset of cavalry warfare: one decisive charge, one moment of personal glory. Bohun lowered his lance, trusting speed, armor, and force to end the fight before it began. At the last moment, Bruce shifted his horse aside. He rose in his stirrups and brought his axe down with full force. The blow split Bohun's helmet and skull. The axe handle shattered from the impact. The English froze. The Scots erupted. Strength had just been redefined, not through armor or speed, but through timing, precision, and nerve. For the Scots, the effect was electric. Their king had just killed an English champion in full view of both armies. Confidence surged, discipline tightened. For the English, doubt crept in. If even their elite knights could fall so quickly, this fight would not follow familiar rules. Strength no longer looked guaranteed. Momentum began to slip before the main battle had even started. That night, English commanders debated their options. Some urged caution, rest the army, find better ground. But King Edward was impatient. Stirling Castle's deadline loomed. Delay felt like weakness. He ordered the attack at dawn. It was a decision driven by pressure, not strategy, and it handed Bruce exactly what he needed. At dawn on June 24th, the English army moved forward. Heavy cavalry led the way, their strength built on momentum, armor, and mass. Knights believed the charge itself would break Scottish resistance as it had so many times before. But the ground narrowed quickly. Horses struggled to maintain formation. The strength of the English assault was real, yet already constrained. Power pressed forward into space that refused to yield. The Scottish schiltrons did not move. They stood firm, shoulder to shoulder, spears braced. These were not reckless peasants. They were disciplined infantry, trained to absorb impact together. When the cavalry struck, horses refused to spear wall or crashed into it. Riders fell. Strength met resistance and broke. The schiltrons bent, but they did not collapse. Collective discipline proved stronger than individual power. As knights tried to push through, horses stumbled into concealed pits. Armor that once provided protection became a burden. Fallen riders could not rise under their own weight. Behind them, more cavalry pressed forward, unable to stop. English strength piled into itself. Momentum became entrapment. What should have been a clean charge turned into a violent, suffocating mass. English longbowmen attempted to intervene. Physically strong and well-trained, they were deadly in open terrain. Here, they were trapped by proximity. The armies were too close. Shots risked killing English soldiers as often as Scots. Strength without room to operate is useless. The archers hesitated, their advantage denied by the very battlefield England had rushed into. Bruce had held back a small cavalry force, lightly armored, fast, and resilient. Now he unleashed them against the English archers. These riders lacked the brute force of English knights, but they had speed and freedom of movement. The archers broke almost immediately. Strength built for defense collapsed under pressure it could not answer. Behind the front lines, thousands of English infantry pressed forward, strong and eager but unable to fight. Packed together, they became spectators to disaster. Heat, exhaustion, and fear spread. Physical strength drained quickly when movement stopped. Men collapsed under armor and weight. The battlefield no longer belonged to generals. It belonged to momentum and panic. Bruce committed his reserves. Fresh Scottish troops surged forward with renewed strength. At the same time, camp followers appeared on the hills, armed with tools and determination. To the exhausted English, it looked like another army. Strength they did not have met strength they could not escape. Panic spread faster than commands. Someone shouted retreat, then another. Discipline shattered. King Edward was forced from the field by his own guards. Strength dissolved into flight. Men threw away weapons and armor just to move faster. What had begun as overwhelming power ended as collapse. The English army did not withdraw. It ran. Thousands of English soldiers lay dead or captured. Noble families were destroyed in a single day. Ransoms flowed into Scottish hands, funding the kingdom's survival. Scottish losses were comparatively light. Strength, when used correctly, had multiplied itself. Bannockburn was no accident. It was control defeating excess. Bannockburn proved England was not invincible. Discipline, terrain, and leadership could defeat numbers and steel. Robert the Bruce emerged not as a rebel, but as a king beyond dispute. Scotland had survived the moment meant to destroy it, and Europe took notice. Years later, England would recognize Scottish independence. Bannockburn did not end the war overnight, but it broke English momentum permanently. Strength alone no longer frightened Scotland. Planning did, unity did, control did. Bannockburn became a lesson written in blood and ground. Bannockburn was not a miracle. It was preparation defeating power, discipline defeating numbers, ground defeating steel. Robert the Bruce did not destroy England's army forever, but in June 1314, he proved something far more dangerous to empires. Overwhelming strength collapses when it fights the wrong battle, on the wrong ground, against the wrong plan.